My name is Ana Morgado, and I'm part of the facilitators team of this symposium. And in this webinar, I'm counting with the technical support and the superpowers of Lymanus, who has been following the various online conversations that we have been promoting. In the past 3 online conversations, we had the possibility to discover a bit more about the current debates on youth political participation at the time of change and uncertainty in Europe, to discuss a bit the political dimension of youth work. And today we will have with us Kevin Buckland that will bring his perspectives and experiences related with activism and the way it has been serving the purpose of redefining political participation by making use of creativity to disrupt the main dominant narratives. So Kevin, welcome. I hand over to you so that you can start with the presentation. And once again, I'd reinforce to our participants to raise their questions in the chat window or to upvote their questions in the Q&A option. So.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you, Anna and for the technical support and helping set this up. Hopefully it will all work well. I am calling in from Olva, the Valle de Olva, a very small valley in central Spain. And we've added a bit of background noise to get sort of a sense of the ambiance here. I hope it won't be too annoying, but if it is, and it gets hard to hear, please just put something into the chat and I'll ask the other people here to be quieter. But don't want to do that until it's necessary. And as a brief introduction, my name is Kevin Buckland. I'm part of the artivistnetwork.org, which I just put into the chat here. So you can see our website. It is a collective and network of different arts activists that use creativity to help bring about social change. We focus specifically on helping artists to be more strategic in their political engagement and helping activists to be more creative in the work that they're doing. And if at any point during this you don't understand something I say, I'm speaking too fast, or please just send a message into the chat box and say that again, didn't understand, and I'll repeat it again. The most important thing is that you all understand. Great, and just a minute of background about myself and how I got involved in artivism, as we call it. I'm an artist, and I started getting involved with political organizing around the climate, global climate justice movement, and realized how often activists were sitting around trying to think of something creative, and realizing actually artists are often making really interesting artworks about different concepts that might not actually be very strategic in terms of pushing specific policies forward or creating specific change. So sort of when we talk about artivism, a metaphor I like to give is sort of comparing the difference between the terms in physics of speed and velocity. Speed is how fast you are going, but velocity is how fast you change the distance in relation to where you started. So with speed, you can be going around very fast, but not actually getting anywhere. But as soon as you talk about velocity, you're actually talking about where you're going. So while art can often be exploring subjects and bringing nuance and critique and things, it might not actually be pushing anywhere specific. So what we're doing is trying to work on how we can use creative activity more strategically to advance urgent social change. Also, a lot of the examples I'll be giving now in the presentation come from the global climate justice movement. This is the area I work in because I see it as a crucial intersectional space of struggle where all other issues collide. We are seeing an unprecedented breakdown of the basic life systems that support life on this planet that humanity has never dealt with before. We are going to need exceptional amounts of creativity to deal with this process in a way that allows us to keep having what we know as a human civilization. So anyone who's young and alive today, we have a lot of work ahead of us, but we're going to have fun while we do. So let me shift over now to the presentation. Just a second. share. Here we are. And cool. So this presentation, yeah, hopefully you can see it okay. Will be focused on creative activism and guerrilla narratives. What we mean by this is how we're looking at actually how creativity can be used to change dominant narratives. If we understand, we can understand the political world we're in, the stories we're telling ourselves as the narratives about what is considered acceptable, what is not, and what society accepts, what is not, what is legal, what is not. And what we can be doing is using creativity to push these narratives in some pretty interesting ways. So let's see. So to start off, I want to just bring up a quote by Bertolt Brecht, which is, "Art is not a mirror held up to reality, but a hammer with which to shape it." I like to start with this chat, sorry. Cool. I like to start with this quote because this is conveys a little bit of what I'm talking about how I think art can be better engaged to create social change. And when I say art, I mean anything creative, which in terms of political organization means anything besides a march or a sort of, or I'll get into this a little bit more about what we mean. But to think about how art can be useful, how it is a tool rather than a way to comment on something. To be honest, the last thing we need is sort of more critique on movements. What we need are people engaging directly in movements. And I always encourage artists to stop talking about movements and start talking with them and engaging with them. And so as we can start to understand sort of the different ways in which activism is framed, we can see sort of here on the screen is an example of sort of typical good activism. This is what sort of the state apparatus likes. They want people to be asking for change to people in power. This is a way that reinforces the power of those who already have it. It is not really democratic because the people's voice doesn't actually have any impact, but it's sort of presented as a consideration that the people with real power can take it. So here is one of the founders of Avaz with Al Gore and the former mayor of New York, I believe, presenting a petition for 100% clean energy to Ban Ki-moon at the front of a march. So this is what's commonly understood of as sort of good activism, as institutions like to frame it. And then in this picture, you see what's commonly referred to as bad activism. This is a black bloc tactic, breaking windows. And while the media loves to talk about this, because it's much simpler to talk about the tactic than actually the perhaps complicated issue that they're raising, then it is, and sorry about the banging outside. It's the neighborhood kids are playing. So this is much easier for a much simpler story to tell than actually getting into the details of why these people are so enraged with this specific jewelry company that was splashing the windows up. And to be honest, this doesn't tend to be particularly productive. And, as we'll get into a bit, it's very hard to tell sort of what the message being communicated is. So one of the questions we like to pose with art is, what else is possible? When we're using creativity, how can we be finding spaces that are neither illegal or explicitly need permission for, but what are the illegal spaces? What are the alternative spaces in which creativity can be engaging directly with structures of power, while not necessarily ceding the power to reinforce those structures themselves? So here in the image is a photograph by the photographer Oriana Elizalde. And this is, I was there where this picture was taken. This was in Barcelona during a general strike. And I like to start with this picture because there had been a large march. We had made this beautiful inflatable silver cube. We were playing with it the entire march. Everyone was having a good time using it sort of as a giant balloon. After the march, people were peacefully gathered in Plaza Catalunya, and yet the riot police started charging, trying to get rid of, get people out of the square, and this was families and whatnot. So the police were entering into a specific logic of their power. They are used to them advancing, and everyone either runs away afraid, or everyone else sort of locks down, gets violent, and tries to fight with them. So what we need to be looking at is how we can be transforming the traditional power relations through protest and activism, that outside of the space of you have to ask permission first to do something, which has its obvious limits, versus specifically breaking the law. So what we did here is instead, we threw this giant inflatable cube at the riot police. As far as I know, there's no laws against that. So they hit it, because that's what riot police do. They hit things, they hit it back, and it bounced back to the crowd. And then the crowd hit it back to the police, and then the police hit it back to the crowd, and the crowd hit it back to the police. And quite quickly, both sides realized that they were playing a game. And neither of them had any idea what to do, because this was changing the narrative that they were in. So then the police started attacking the cube. They started hitting it with their clubs. Finally, they succeeded in deflating it. And you know, they conquered, they won, they deflated the cube, and they put it away. And then they went back to line. But they didn't start charging again. So we had actually successfully stopped a police charge with no violence, with a little bit of creativity, a little bit of fun. So this is kind of the space that's interesting to be thinking about as we're exploring what are the what are the other spaces we can be occupying with creative activism. Yeah, I'm just gonna. Cool. So there's a few principles I want to kind of engage with a bit more directly, because you know, if you can do some of these principles, you can have a fantastic impact. And I really talk about creativity as well. Is if we understand we are living in an age where so much media is visual, we can actually be really understanding about that creating, curating a single image can actually have potentially much more impact than gathering tens of thousands of people all together. One of the principles is disrupt with style. And this is really thinking about how a single action can be telling a story. This is an action that happened in UK in the early 90s of the Reclaim the Streets movement, protesting the expansion of highways. And what these people did is they bought two cars, crashed them into each other in the middle of the street. The two people came out, pretended to start having a fight, and then thousands of other people showed up and started having a dance party around them, and transformed the entire street from, you know, a busy highway into a street party. And this was an interesting example because it, you know, changes the logic. There's nothing illegal about having a car accident, and thus, you know, successfully blocking a street. And it also shows how we can be moving from protest, which the origin of the word protest is the same origin as the word testes. It tends to be an angry thing that we're against something, but how we can be looking at activism as a way in which we can actually be inspiring people to imagine what other worlds, more collectively, more commonly held, can be possible. And here is another action that was from that same movement. And this was at another protest against the construction of a highway. And they built this beautiful puppet. There was a woman on top playing bagpipes. And as they sort of marched upon the highway that they were protesting, the woman was playing the bagpipes with this giant skirt. But while this was a beautiful action in itself, underneath the skirt of the woman were people with jackhammers. And they were digging up the highway and planting trees. So they were embodying a narrative of replacing the highway with green spaces, which is what they were trying to communicate. And I tell this story at the beginning of sessions like this, because I think this action I've come across, I've heard told to me, I've seen people mention so many times. And a friend who organized it said, look, it was actually a pretty bad action we didn't actually have much impact. The trees were ripped out hours later, the highway was fixed, and traffic got back to normal. But the story of the action spread. So ways in which we can think about actually how we're creating stories that are worth telling and can be spread across the world. Cool. And just a few simple principles that can potentially help as we start to think about how we can be engaging, creating actions that engage with dominant narratives, that transform relations of power rather than reinforce them. So find a symbol that tells a big story. Here's an image by a UK graffiti artist called Banksy, who is, many of you, has anyone heard of Banksy? Maybe put something in the chat if you've heard of this. He's pretty well known. But he is one of the masters at hacking images, subvertising images, changing something so that it is not just telling the story of what it is, but also the story of what it could be. So this is a great example from New York. This is a parking garage. And just by partially painting over some of the letters and adding the woman on a swing, it begs the question, why is this a parking lot instead of a park? And this is something very interesting to do in activism, is try to find images that can hold conflicting stories together, that hold both narratives at once, and then the opposition between them is the story itself. Another example is from which our participant from Izmir might remember, was during the Gezi Park occupation and the succeeding protests that happened around that. While CNN International was covering extremely severe cases of police violence on international news all over the world, CNN Turkey was playing a documentary about penguins. So immediately the penguin became overnight a symbol for the media is ignoring what's really happening. And suddenly a symbol that the day before was just a penguin meant suddenly had a whole new meaning. So it's always useful to think about what are these symbols that contain entire stories and can tell whole stories. And if you can see both how they are already being used by others, what is a word or symbol that perhaps your adversary is using that they are trying to embed with meaning? And companies do this all the time with their logos. They use one symbol, but they really want to fill it with the idea of when you see their logo, you're filled with this, oh yeah, I remember them. They remind me of my grandmother's cooking and all things that are wholesome. So thinking too about how we can be sort of supporting, keeping an eye out for images. An example from Catalonia, where I live, is during the independence referendum, the Spanish police sent thousands of new police, and they were all staying on this cruise ship, which was slightly ridiculous. So everyone started using Tweety Bird, the little yellow cartoon, sort of as a symbol of the police presence in Catalonia, the uninvited state apparatus of violence. And people were making so much fun of it, they actually had to cover it up with these black tarps and took it off again. But it became a symbol that could tell a story much bigger than itself. Also with creative activism, and this is, for those of you, I think it's very useful for those working on the fringes of institutions, both maybe you're engaged with political movements, grassroots movements, and working towards some specific political campaign, is it's really worth being very strategic with what you're focusing on. Seeing where governments may need a specific push to be able to move something through. So really thinking about how inside government strategies and outside strategies might not be the same. For example, this action, which was one of the actions that really kick-started the divestment movement from fossil fuels. If you've heard of divestment, it's the idea of creating a moral argument about the injustice of specifically public or even private institutions, being associated with fossil fuel companies that are knowingly destroying life on Earth. So this was an incredibly simple action. It cost them about £17 to make. This was in the Tate Britain, one of the museums. But they chose a perfect backdrop. They had a stage that already had a content. They were targeting the the Tate Museum's association with BP, British Petroleum. And you can see the BP logo on the oil canisters. And showing the human frailty surrounded by other naked images of Greek sculpture and whatnot, and covering that live person with oil. And this had huge impact. It got on the cover of the Financial Times, which is a space where it's very possible to have very real impact in terms of people's investments. And it brought the issue forward. So really thinking about how a small image, a small action can have big impact. This also was very useful in kickstarting the whole wave of divestment movements, criticizing public and private institutions' engagement with fossil fuel companies. And they're still targeting these museums to drop BP as one of their official sponsors. And as I mentioned, it's important that we're understanding what power means. And while delivering a petition may be reaffirming the power of decision makers, we also need to be understanding who are the people who traditionally don't have power inside society, and how we can be lifting up their voice, supporting their voices to be heard, and bringing that power forward. So this is an example of some street art from North America. And one thing they've done is they have adopted the imagery of a monarch butterfly as the symbol of migration. They say migration is natural. So they've been trying to reframe the image of human migration as something completely natural. It is human borders which are unnatural. So this has been giving power and protagonism to the migrants rather than themselves, rather than just to the authorities that decide about them. Another very useful principle when we're trying to especially help lift up unseen stories is make visible the invisible. And this is another example from a really fantastic group called Fossil Free Culture, based in the Netherlands. And they have successfully targeted the Van Gogh Museum for its relationship with Shell as a financial sponsor. The Van Gogh Museum and 3 other museums, thanks to their work, have dropped Shell as a sponsor. And this is an exhibition they were holding in the museum called On the Verge of Insanity. So they, members of their group, dressed up in the typical white bedgowns of the insane, and wandered about the museum saying things about how insane it is that this company is destroying the world, destroying ecosystems all over the world. Yeah. Another example of how to sort of make visible the invisible, this is also in Barcelona, a project by a fantastic collective called Enmedio. Their website is enmedio.info. And this is in a public plaza where there was a sculpture, and the sculpture was of a man who had gotten rich predominantly through the slave trade. And through a campaign, we were able to get the sculpture removed. But right now there was nothing there. So this was a project to link some of the victims of contemporary wage slavery to the history of Andrés López y López and the tradition of colonialism and slave trade. And this was a powerful use of how simple photographs, this doesn't cost very much to print out. You can use programs such as Rasterbaiter or Poster Razor to create images the size you want for free, print them out on A4 and paste them up. Also, this is a nice example of a light intervention in public space. This does no harm to documents, it can be removed. It's just paper stuck to a wall. That problem. Sometimes we use big inflatables. There was a gas pipeline no one was talking about. So just making something big, colorful, kind of fun is a good way to get attention. And we were outside the EU headquarters in Barcelona. And also thinking about when you're trying to make visible the invisible is connecting different parts of the story. And all of these tactics and this creativity is mostly being led by youth. Because they are the ones that are really understanding the ways in which social media is actually how they're reaching their own public, potentially even and having greater impact to reach people of their own generation through conventional media. This is bringing two parts of a story together. It's bringing the impacts of fossil fuel pollution, of coal pollution, to the headquarters and the advertisements of Vattenfall in Berlin. Just a little bit more. As we're understanding the role of activism and sort of street activism in transforming politics, we can understand as art and creativity can open up a space in which a conversation can then happen. Sometimes we need to name ideas, give body to it, create a symbol that people can start rallying around to create the space that can then open up political space. You open up a conversation that then political space can move into, and then political change can come from. A way to think about this is to think about how we can be changing the narrative. Cool. Okay. Some questions are coming up. Really good. We'll get to those in a sec. So while we're talking about narrative, so don't change your role in the story. Change the story you are in. Often in activism, there is a tendency to fall into the trap of victimizing ourselves, accepting the role of they have the power, we do not. You have to side with us because we're the poor, impoverished ones who don't have power. And this is, again, a narrative that reaffirms the traditional power structures. What we want to be doing is transforming those, empowering youth to understand that they are actually the real agents of change, that society is changed not just by institutions, but by people all over the world. I love mentioning the story that, a single slave leading an uprising in Haiti led France to sell all of the entire central section of the United States to fund the war. One person, as we've seen with Greta Thunberg, who's transformed the story that one person can't have an impact on society. She has radically transformed world history forever. One person taking action. So we need to be acknowledging and remembering the power we have. And so thinking not just of our role in the story, and certainly not of us as the victims of the story, but we're the heroes of the story. And pointing out how we shift that context we're in. So you're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic. Let's expand out the logic a little bit. Zoom out from that one person in the car to the traffic jam they're sitting in. And with the climate movement, you can see sort of the evolution of this narrative that we're in, that goes from saving the earth, switch off the TV and computer, save the Arctic, save the world, save the trees, save the climate, save the planet. And saving is still, reinforcing this power structure of the world is the victim, we are the heroes, we will save it. Whereas actually, I'm jumping ahead of myself. So here's a way to change that narrative, is not save the humans. Here I am in the chimpanzee suit, blockading a series of banks around downtown London as part of a climate camp in the UK in 2009. And then with Extinction Rebellion now, changing the narrative, adding time scale to it, 12 years to save Earth, which is a reference to the IPCC report, the highest governmental body on scientific climate change, pointing out that we have 11 years to avoid a lock-in to collapse. So instead of saving the Earth, let's try to remember the Earth isn't dying, but it's being killed. And those who are killing it have names and addresses. How can we be pointing the finger not that we are the ones that need to save the Earth, but you, CEO of ExxonMobil, you are destroying it. We're coming after you. And then a further evolution of this narrative, which we saw in a project called Climate Games, which is fantastic. If you want to check it out, that was grew up around the COP21 in Paris, is a transformation of the narrative from Save the Earth to We Are Nature Defending Itself. A space that repositioned humans inside of nature, inside the system that we are in, and realigned us back as being part of a wider story. So I think with this, I'm going to leave the presentation there for the moment. And if I figure out how, I'm going to jump back to being visible. I think you can see me. Cool. So I know that was quite a lot. I know there was a bit of background noise. Hopefully it was interesting. Cool.
Thank you, Kevin. I think that would be nice now if people start to write down their questions and upvote them. So let's see what comes from the participants. I actually wrote here a question to understand a bit the background and the relationship between the ones that we have online with the activism and these forms of participation, by understanding a bit who is engaging in these forms of participation and why people decide to engage or not, how they see and perceive the impact, and also the recognition of these movements when they participate or they decide to don't participate. So hopefully we will get some inputs on that as well. So let's see. And and while we wait, maybe I can ask you, like from your perspective, and it seems that activism is quite shareable and can have a high impact in citizens. But still, for change to happen, and sorry if this is my mindset, decision makers need to be influenced too. So what does activism make a higher impact? When does activism make a higher impact between decision makers? When does it have an impact close to the decision makers?
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a really good question, and one that we're constantly confronting with is, and specifically in the realm of cultural change, it is, again, how is cultural change linked to political transformation? And what I said before, sort of how culture can be opening up space for political policies to move into, is a good question. And I think in terms of success, I think most of the things I've mentioned are trying to give examples of how people that don't traditionally have a voice in politics have been raising issues that aren't being addressed, have been bringing those to the forefront, and how that, if people don't have other avenues for political participation, what is the way in which creativity can be used to push something forward in new ways? As the example of from Barcelona, the success in getting the sculpture of this slaveholder removed from public space, and with some of the examples of and a question too, a very good question from Alexandra, of what is the actual impact of these actions besides raising awareness. I think we've seen the success of some of these with the fossil-free divestment campaigns. that action I showed from the Van Gogh Museum, that and other actions were successful in getting the Van Gogh Museum to drop Shell as its sponsor. This is part of a larger divestment movement, but cities across the world have also been divesting their public money that is invested in the stock market, making sure that none of that is directly funding fossil fuels.
I think very aligned with what you are bringing. We have here a question from Alexandra, related with the actual impact besides raising awareness. So the actual I think both questions are very close to each other. What do you think? What is the actual impact of this type of action?
Yeah, and I think this question of raising awareness is we are in a collapsing society. The basic ecosystems which sustain life on Earth are collapsing. We're in the 6th grade extinction right now. The Amazon is burning. Unprecedented levels of ecological disruption are happening. I think it is a question where we need to be going beyond raising awareness. Specifically, we need to be creating crisis moments that force action. And I think this is the way in which often activism can play a role, is by bringing something that has been latent or unseen, bringing to the surface, creating an image that can capture that, and thus needs to be addressed. With a lot of the climate stuff recently, we've been seeing cities, towns all over the world are declaring a climate emergency right now. And this is a direct result of, in the past 6 months, highly escalated street mobilization of people showing this is a crisis. We need to be taking it seriously. And that, I think that has then created a space of, okay, now you've declared a climate emergency. What are the concrete policies you are going to take that align with an emergency of this scale?
Thank you, Kevin. We got a comment from Adam, which says that use music to advocate for a cause. Actually, during the European elections is what is mentioned, and maybe I don't know if Adam, you want to take the mic to express a bit your feelings when people engage in these type of actions. Why do you feel people engage, and if they engage with this strategical understanding of going beyond raising awareness, as we are speaking here, and they engage with the impact vision in the decision making processes?
Yeah. Well, can you hear me?
Yeah. Sure. Thank you.
Great. What I would say is, due to my experiences and so far being involved in this so much that I love, I think, yeah, there is still something missing that we still, most of us, I would say here in Portugal, basically to give an example, in Portugal, we have issues whereby, yeah, most of us are not willingly trying to get involved because we are not being heard or being listened or being allowed. Me basically representing refugees in Portugal, I've tried so many times, I've tried so many ways to try to get this done, but most of the time we don't get the chances, or we are not being allowed to be there until this last year, 2018, that we were able to come along to build up a forum of refugees with 5 main refugee-led organizations to be able to have access to be sharing and talking with those over there on the top, mainly like those in charge within the government. Yeah, as I said, as you can see from your question earlier that you wrote to us, yeah, I did try to organize something like that, and in the end, I started to get support because we became members of the European Council on Refugees and Exile in Belgium, in Brussels. So we got some support in trying to be able to push ourselves up there to get the limit, whereby we try to also get a protocol with the Secretary of State for Equality and Citizenship in Portugal, So we were working in hand together with the Commission of High Migration in Portugal, and working with other organizations and associations in trying to have the advocacy work going through. And we're using art, we're using other events, we're using a lot of stuff like organizing like dinner from Syria, or dinner, because our part was mainly with refugees and migrants.
Mm-hmm.
So we were doing that a lot, and yeah, it's going good. It's really going good, and
Yeah.
I got the opportunity also using my music in part of that to push it higher, to be an advocate in that. So yeah,
Okay. Thank you,
it's
Adam,
really
for
going good.
thank you, Adam, for sharing your experience. I think that you made quite clear the existing complement between traditional or more conventional forms of participation and unconventional, and the use of arts. That is actually the topic here. And I don't know, Kevin, if you want to comment on what was said, but I also trigger your comment with a question, which is to go a bit beyond the complement between these conventional and unconventional forms, to go beyond it. What activism misses and requires from traditional forms, and the opposite, what traditional forms are missing and requiring from unconventional forms. So how do you see this relationship to push for agendas, to push for change, for social change? That is actually what we are discussing here.
Yeah, this is for Adam, or this is for Kevin? It's for me, right?
I think that, Adam, you are welcome, and then we can also go for it. And
Okay.
Nice, and also the others. I mean, I think there is one participant here that I cannot see. Yeah, it's you, but also the others are welcome to comment on this discussion, and then we can pass to hand over and pass the floor to them. So go for it.
Yeah. Well, for me to put a comment on this, like a deeper comment, I would always go on the part, because I don't know, because my part mainly that what we do is regarding the issue of regarding the rights of refugees, allowing refugees the opportunity and the free speech for them to use their own voices. But you were asking about tradition, right? Tradition, comparing or comparison between these two parts. So
What?
the question, if you could give me the question again, please.
Yeah. So how conventional and unconventional forms of participation can complement each other, what they are missing, and can recruit from the other to be stronger, to actually be able to push for the agendas. Did I make myself clear, Adam?
Yeah. I think it sounds clear. And I would say regarding this, I would say the tradition of art would be much more stronger. I was listening to Kevin all this while, and it was really a great job. But we need to put more art, not just art design, but art as in music, as in as in something more stronger. I think something more stronger. But the tradition of art is something that can bring people, can really bring people to come out in order to participate and be able to fight with us on this. And that's what I think would always be the best and would really work out. If that answers the question so far, yeah.
Okay,
What do you
thank
say?
you, Adam. Maybe now I pass the word to Kevin if he wants to comment. Thank you very much, Adam.
Yeah,
Can you please unmute your mic, Adam?
Yeah, it's gone. It's already gone.
and thank you, Adam.
All right.
Really great to hear. And get in touch with us through the artivistnetwork.org. Let's collaborate more. We need more musicians. We're mostly painters and inflatable people. No, I think this is a really good question, and I think we, as social movements outside of traditional institutional powers, we cannot deceive ourselves that that we have the political power confronting the climate emergency and any grave crisis. We need to move quickly. We need to be addressing these things, and the political institutions are the ones that have these power. But we cannot expect to be powerless and to be listened to. So I think what Adam highlighted was a great example of how to use creativity and art to build power, to build a base, build a power so that you can get listened to. Start making your music, get people listening to you, and then you have a platform by which then you can engage with power. Start doing something creative, get lots of people showing up, and then you have a block, a position of power by which you can engage with traditional power structures. Also, I think another thing I think Adam highlighted really well is the need to use culture and go beyond just activism. Often, if you want to talk to activists, use activism. If you want to talk to people, use culture. So I think there's much more we can be doing to be reaching out, getting in touch with more people, and building wider and stronger alliances to continue building collective power.
If you wish to talk, click on the button, raise hand. Okay, so let's see if someone else has.
And in the meantime, one thing I forgot to mention actually is I think also when specifically we're talking about youth action, I think we need to remember and at least acknowledge that we are in a transformative time of unprecedented youth action. This September 20th and September 27th, we'll see the school strike movement elevate to an unprecedented scale. And this is a global youth movement realizing that they are all frontline directly impacted by what the climate crisis actually means. And I think when confronted with the fact that, all of these predictions for 2050, knowing the people that are 18 today, 2050 is a much realer, closer deadline to them than some people my age or even older. So I think the urgency of youth action is being totally redefined. And also in terms of the world's population, the global population is increasingly younger, especially on some other continents outside of Europe.
We have here one question. For me, it's not very clear, but anyways, I will raise it and I will ask the person also if it's not so clear for you, Kevin, to rephrase it. So the question is regarding the role of public relations in political activism.
So perhaps Alexandra also can ask question herself and clarify.
Yeah, please.
So Alexandra, you are allowed to comment more. Okay, Alexandra cannot talk. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the question around the role of public relations and how that affects political activism. If you can say a little bit more about what you mean, I think you can give a more precise response, but I think it is, this is a clear space where organizations can and should be being good allies to helping to lift up grassroots voices, organizations that have PR capacity. You don't always need to be telling your own story. Find who else is talking about your things and lift it up. Some of the more larger sense just around engagement with the media. I really advocate creativity as a way by which we can be creating content that spreads outside of traditional forms of media.
I think that Alexandra, she explained a bit more what she was looking for, and I think it's more on terms of visibility, like what can be done to promote the actions and to advertise them, basically. So to work on visibility of the actions, how organizations can do it. If you have any tips. Okay, so this is the question. Great. If you have any tips on how, besides doing the action, as far as I'm understanding the question, how organizations can give visibility to it.
Yeah, good question. And I'd be curious to hear answers from anyone else as well, because this is definitely not my area of specialties. So maybe, I don't, yeah. Yeah, but I think, this is think about who is being directly impacted by whatever issue you're working on, and help them to tell their own story rather than always pushing your own story. It is a way.
Let's see if we have. When we talk about youth activism, we should also consider the role of politicians. How can we engage them in what we are doing? So yeah, this question is very related with the first one I raised. Kevin, do you want to add any other idea to this? How can we engage politicians when we talk about youth activism and artivism?
Sure. I think right now we have perhaps the best example I've seen in my lifetime in the United States with the Sunrise Movement. And this is a creative group of youth, very like 18-year-olds. Is like a friend works with them and she's like 30 and she's the oldest one in the office. And they started organizing by telling political candidates, whoever's strongest on climate, we're going to support you. We're going to go out knocking on doors in your district. We're going to help get you elected because we want politicians that are strong on climate in office. So people como like Alexia Ocasio-Cortez said, great, I'm strong on climate, let's do this. They went out knocking on doors. They built a solid relationship. So that way when Alexia Ocasio-Cortez got into office, she already had a strong relationship with grassroots youth movements, that they would listen to her, she would listen to them, and there was trust already built there. I think now as we're seeing youth mobilizing, we are going to be in an incredibly exciting year or two, as we need to transform the global economy, which is currently based on fossil fuels, and it needs to be based on something else. It needs to decarbonize and transform its energy sources. We have to change the world. And we're going to see a lot of interesting youth, as a lot of this youth anger, worry, excitement around climate change gets pushed into, okay, how does this become policies that actually affect people's lives? I think just like in the US, the Green New Deal has transformed the political landscape of changing climate change from an environmental problem to a societal problem, to really articulating how by addressing climate change, we're addressing issues such as care, education, and supporting other areas of low carbon work. I think we'll be seeing more and more that youth are actually the ones that are turning people out onto the streets, turning people out to vote, and have increasingly more power. And I think, so how to engage politicians, what we're doing is if they're doing something good, be loud about it. If they're doing something bad, be loud about it. And they're going to follow you. If they get 500 tweets about them, they're gonna take a glance,
So it's 1 o'clock. So this is the time for us to start to close our conversation here. I would like to say that a lot still needs to be discussed, and in 12 days we will be together in the symposium. And actually, Kevin will join us there, and we will have conversations and workshops around these topics related also with the rights of activism, the complement between the various forms of participation, and on the recognition of the forms that are not so visible, and from which groups they are being pushed. So now you can still use the chat if you want to continue your conversation. I invite you to see the website, to check the website of the Youth Partnership, and to share the information that you have there. We will also have the video there for you to share it on your social networks. And from my side is...
And I just wanted to...
Yeah. Go, Kevin.
Sorry to interrupt. Just to say that feel free to get in contact with me. Adam, definitely. You got to get in contact. And feel free to reach me on Facebook at Kevin the Painter, or here's my email address, artivisto@gmail.com. And our website is www.artivistnetwork.org. Definitely would love to hear specifically more experiences and stories from all of you, particularly people outside of Western Europe that might have very useful other learnings and knowledge, to really share some stories. Send me links, videos. I'm always curious to hear this. And so I can include it in the next time I do something like this. Thanks.